Today, we're going to dive into a secret that could completely change how you learn a language. It tackles a problem that, let's be honest, drives almost every single language learner crazy.
So let's get right to it. You know the words, you studied the grammar, you've done the drills, but when you actually try to speak to someone, you just freeze, right? The words get stuck, and it all comes out slow and clunky. If that sounds like you, trust me, you are not alone. And it turns out there's a huge piece of the puzzle that most of us are missing.
We can call this the fluency puzzle. You know, it's that huge, frustrating gap between all the stuff you know in your head and what you can actually say out loud in a real conversation.
I mean, think about it. People can spend years in classrooms, pass all the tests, get great grades, but then they find themselves in a real-world conversation and it all falls apart. They sound kind of hesitant, like they're building each sentence one painful word at a time. Meanwhile, native speakers just talk, right? It seems so effortless. So what is their secret?
Well, the secret isn't what you think. It's not about memorizing a bigger dictionary or mastering every single complex grammar rule. The real key, the real game changer, is something called lexical chunks. So, what on earth are they? Well, think of lexical chunks as, like, prefabricated blocks of language. They're just groups of words that almost always appear together. Your brain doesn't have to build a sentence from scratch every single time you speak. Instead, it can just grab one of these ready-made phrases and pop it right in.
And here's the crazy part. You already know thousands of these in your own language. We're talking about things like collocations, saying heavy rain instead of strong rain, or phrasal verbs like look up to someone. Idioms, of course, like break a leg. Even simple, everyday phrases like by the way, or sentence starters like if I were you. All of those, they're lexical chunks.
Here's the best way to picture it. Imagine you're building a house. Trying to form a sentence using individual words is like laying down every single brick one by one. It's slow, it's hard work, but using lexical chunks, that's like grabbing a whole, giant, prefabricated wall and just dropping it into place. Boom. It's way faster, way more efficient, and the final result is a lot more solid. And hey, this isn't some grand new idea. Researchers were talking about this all the way back in 1980. They figured out that native speakers aren't these supercomputers doing complex grammar calculations in their heads. Nope, they just have this massive library of chunks they can pull from. It's what makes their speech sound so fluid and natural. So that begs the question, could this be the shortcut for language learners too?
Well, that is the exact question a group of researchers decided to answer. They set up a really cool experiment to see if actually teaching people lexical chunks could make them more fluent speakers.
Okay, so here's how they did it. They got 60 intermediate English learners and split them in half. One half, the experimental group, got special lessons. They were actively taught all these chunks, collocations, idioms, common phrases, and they practiced using them over and over. And the other half, the control group, they just kept doing what they were already doing. You know, the normal textbook stuff, grammar rules, translation, no special focus on chunks at all.
The whole study was pretty straightforward. Step 1, everybody took a speaking test so the researchers could see where they were starting from. Step 2, for 6 weeks, the experimental group got those special lessons focusing on chunks. And Step 3, everybody took the speaking test again. The big question was, would those 6 weeks make any real difference?
And the results? Well, they weren't just a little interesting. They were a massive breakthrough. Let's take a look at the actual data. All right, first up, let's look at the group that was taught the lexical chunks. See that? Look at that jump. Before the study, their average fluency score was hovering just under 10, but after just 6 weeks of focusing on chunks, it shot up to over 12. That's not just a small bump, that's a really significant improvement.
Okay, so what about the other group, the one that just stuck with the old school textbook method? Well, look at their scores. They barely moved an inch. 6 weeks of studying and their speaking fluency was pretty much exactly where it started. Statistically, there was no change at all.
And here it is, the final showdown. This chart compares the two groups head-to-head after the experiment was over. And it's not even close. The experimental group, that's the taller bar, was just way more fluent than the control group. The data makes it crystal clear. Now you might see this little bit of science jargon. P is less than 0.05. So what does that mean? Basically, in science, this is the gold standard. It means that there's less than a 5% chance that these results happen by pure luck. In other words, this was the real deal. The improvement was real, and it was because they learned lexical chunks.
So this is all fascinating stuff, right? But what does this experiment actually mean for you, sitting at home, trying to learn a new language? Well, let's break down exactly what you should take away from this.
So here's your new game plan. First, shift your focus. Stop just memorizing individual words and start learning whole phrases. When you store these ready-made chunks in your brain, it frees up so much mental energy. You can speak faster and you'll sound way more natural. And a cool side effect? It actually lowers your speaking anxiety and makes you feel more confident. And the best part is, this isn't just a fun little learning hack. It's a method that is now scientifically proven to work.
So, we'll just leave you with this one final thought. What if you stopped trying to build your language skills one tiny brick at a time? What if instead you started collecting those big prefabricated walls? It could be the fluency breakthrough you've been waiting for.